the crossing analyses of the IT industry and international relations. Welcome to the third episode of the revamped edition of the Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. I'm Rocky Uriankai. Today we're talking about China's policies to control the export of gallium and germanium from a strategic perspective, and we've chosen this topic because it's a very important issue that impacts not only the global semiconductor industry, but also a significant event in the US-China tech competition. China's Ministry of Commerce and the General Administration of Customs announced that decision on July 3rd, which is more than 10 days ago before the making of this episode, and a lot of confusing information has become clearer. For example, China's gallium and germanium reserves and production are one of the largest in the world, but it's not as if China throws out the export control of the two metals. It can reverse its difficult situation in the chip war, which China is now being strongly suppressed by the US. So I think we might as well use this single event to analyze the US-China tensions that have been going on for more than 5 years. Let us not judge with sensibility and emotions, but based on the research of an international relations scholar to think why the Chinese government is doing this, it is definitely not a result of a sudden brain fart. It is also not purposely trying to give US Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen a warning before her visit to China. Such comments are all too shallow. Okay, let's get to the conclusion. I believe that the Chinese government's export control of the two raw materials is an inevitable outcome of the US-China tech war, or so-called the new Cold War between the US and China, a tactical maneuver. How will it develop in the future? We will talk about this at the end. Let me first tell you how I came to this conclusion. I compared the confrontation between the US and China with the Cold War that the US and the Soviet Union had fought for nearly half a century, and we see that the US-Soviet Cold War had 5 major characteristics, which the audience can compare with the confrontation that the US and China are now displaying. You can find that there is only one characteristic that the US-China tech war has that is different from the 5 of the US-Soviet Cold War. And this difference happened to be the battlefield where the US and China had the most frequent fire exchanges. China's control of gallium and germanium exports is just a tactical maneuver on this battlefield. Of course, I will also explain why China's tactical counterattacks have been less frequent in the past. Are you ready? Okay, before we start, we're going to have a promotional service time. The IT industry is changing rapidly. How can we grasp the most accurate and important information in the shortest time? DIGITIMES is the world's most professional Chinese language IT industry newspaper. DIGITIMES launches the mobile edition of DIGITIMES to help readers acquire first-hand industry information anytime and anywhere. Check out the description section below the video for more information about the mobile version of DIGITIMES. Okay, first of all, why does the US care so much about the rise of China's economic power? The reason is very simple. When a country is rich, it can become stronger, and only when it has money can it modernize its national defense. Play passively, the nation can strengthen its defense, but if play actively, it can strive for more economic benefits for itself, and what will be the best way to do that? Setting rules in your favor. The US has been doing so since the end of World War II. Academically, the action is called the establishment of an international order. The United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and even the WTO are all part of the so-called post-war international order. The US knows this all too well. Whoever makes the rules will definitely be more favorable to whoever makes them, right? A country that is able to establish an international order is commonly known as a hegemon. But what about a country that has risen to power and is not satisfied with the existing international order? Usually the hegemonic power will regard it as a challenger. As we mentioned at the beginning about the US-Soviet Cold War, the war lasted for 46 years, which is in a roughly similar state of affairs, with a challenger and a status quo supporting superpower. A lot of things have happened in the 46 years, just like a lot of things have happened between the US and China in the past few years, and all of these are just the surface of the events, and there are too many complicated phenomena underneath. Therefore, we have to organize them into streamlined data before we can see the clues. Fortunately, there are scholars who have already done this work, so we just need to learn. Let's look at the chart of the 5 major characteristics of the Cold War put forward by scholars, and let me read them out. The state system plus ideology, of course, led to sharp opposition between the two nations. Their propaganda rivalry was very intense, while the military and diplomatic rivalries were also very fierce, and economically the US and the USSR did not interact. Well, viewers of this program mostly already know what is going on, and let's go straight to comparing the various phenomena of the US-China tech war over the past 5 years with these 5 characteristics. Let's think about it. The attacks launched by the Trump administration in 2018 were initially called a tariff war by the media, then changed to US-China trade war, And then we soon realized that the core of the trade war is actually science and technology, which is why it is also called a tech war. Then the importance of the semiconductor industry and the IT industry was highlighted. So there is a saying of chip war now, with someone even having written a book. Recently, Biden has opened up the artificial intelligence battlefield, and we've talked about NVIDIA as the protagonist of the AI war on the very front of the storm, while we are now thinking of the tariff war, the trade war, the tech war, the chip war, and even the AI war at the same time. The US and China's military and diplomatic competitions are also still going on, doesn't it? Aside from showing their capability within the military and diplomatic fields, the war of propaganda via traditional media, personal media, and internet water army, now popularly known as the War of Perceptions, has never stopped. The basic reason for such obvious competition in these areas is that the ideologies and political systems of the US and China are very different. So we find that the characteristics of the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union are mostly similar to those of the current confrontation between the US and China, but there is one difference, and that is the economy of the United States and that of the Soviet Union does not interact with each other. But let's look at the economy of the US and China in the last 30 years. Mutual dependence, serious mutual dependence. In fact, the trade war was in full swing in 2018, and now both sides have imposed tariffs on each other. And as a result, the total trade volume between the two sides still reached a record high last year. In other words, if we call this confrontation between the US and China Cold War 2.0 and the US-Soviet Cold War 1.0, what is the two's biggest difference? The US and China are too economically dependent on each other, and in the international arena, dependence gives power to the other. The US, as a hegemonic power, certainly doesn't wish to be dependent on China, as it has given China the power to not obey the US and vice versa. If China wants to rise, it can't and shouldn't rely on the US, and that's the real reason the so-called decoupling issue is starting to be mentioned. It is because the two superpowers don't want their economy to be held hostage by the other. If the above logic is acceptable to all of us, then let's look at China's decision to implement export controls on gallium and germanium starting August 1st, and the earlier decision by China's State Internet Information Office, CEO, to restrict Micron's participation in China's infrastructure projects. All this is just a tactical move to reduce dependence on the other side. But given the depth of mutual dependence between the US and China in the past, it is going to be difficult for the two to be completely disengaged. Even with well-prepared plans and deep estimates, the thing will still require multiple tries to accomplish. But what are the principles of trying? Seek, choose, and find its advantageous field. The US is stronger in science and technology and has more advantages, allowing it to have more room to find areas to try. What is the strategic goal? No longer allow China to take advantage and have a free ride, and find ways to slow down the rise of China's development. China's scholars understand the approach and called the US's strategy precise decoupling, and this is also why China's counterattacks are much less. Even if China has some technology areas that are comparable to the US, such as quantum communications, the International Space Station, or infrastructure engineering, China is generally at a disadvantage in technology, so it has to put up with it for the time being, which scholars called to maintain strategic patience, as many of the technology fields all require chips. China cannot achieve self-sufficiency in high-end chips, and therefore it is impossible and unnecessary for it to jump out at this time, randomly picking a field that it has no advantage in to launch a counterattack. Doing so is more likely to attract more suppression, so to endure and maintain strategic patience is necessary. So we can now understand China's previous move on slightly punishing US-based Micron, coupled with China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasizing that it does not target specific enterprises to limit the export of gallium and germanium. I believe it can satisfy some of the domestic nationalist sentiments, but this is not really the key point. The important thing is that China is now practicing the imitation of the US's actions to identify end consumers, differentiate military and civilian customers, and protect national security based on domestic laws. China is learning it as the tech war between the US and China is unlikely to end anytime soon. Semiconductor is the first battlefield the US opened, which is putting China at a disadvantage, but China may still have the opportunity to turn active and open up battlefields where it has an advantage in, making practice rather necessary. For this round, we can see how the US will react, and then study what the next step should be. That's what I said at the beginning. I think the export control of gallium and germanium is an inevitable outcome of the US-China tech war, and in the future there will be more back-and-forth tactical maneuvers between the two sides, which is a kind of practice processes. Some people think that China has started the rare earth war against the US, but that is too early to say. We have to continue to observe. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce and the General Administration of Customs will approve the export of gallium and germanium in the future. Thank you for watching Tech Geopolitics Unveiled. We broadcast this program every 2 weeks and welcome your feedback. Please leave your comments and let us know your thoughts. I am Rocky. See you next time.